let's talk about the second problem. And we talked about it a little bit, the promissory note. The promissory note doesn't make it either, right? So there's the mortgage just traveling along the track and it stops. And then there's the actual note itself. And when you do a foreclosure, you have to take that promissory note and give it to the court in exchange for your foreclosure judgment. The reason is you're trying to get it out of the stream of commerce so no one else comes along and tries to sue you on it. So for them to get the judgment, they have to give the court the original promissory note. Back in the day, I'm representing creditors. I'm looking for the original promissory note. I'm in their safe, in the vault. Where is it? We don't know. What do you mean you don't know? How can you lose the original documents? We lost them. I think Joe came in and cleaned and, he threw them away. What? So that's a problem, but it happens. It happens all the time. In fact, it happens so much, there's a statute that says, it's a reestablishment statute, which says if the bank says, okay, look, we had it, we lost it, we don't know what happened to it, okay, and they can reestablish the terms, they can get it without the original document. They have to say that they're not going to come after you or they're not going to let anyone else come after you for it, so they can reestablish it, okay? But guess what? Part of the statute and part of what they have to swear in their complaint says they had possession of it when they lost it, or that they had the right to enforce it when they lost it. But we get back to the same issue again. What if they never had it in the first place? It stopped today, and F is now coming after you, but they never had possession or the right to pursue it. They can't reestablish it, okay? So those are two major defenses. Now the problem is a lot of times they really do have the note, they just haven't caught up with them. So we'll file a motion to dismiss and then they find it. But that does happen. But that is, again, another defense. So let's go back to the slide before. No, we'll stay with there. Okay, so those are two major defenses to that. We will file a motion to dismiss and say, prove it. Then they'll come back and say, well, we have a right to it. And maybe I end up having to then do an answer, and I do what are called affirmative defenses, discovery, saying, okay, I want you to tell me when you lost that. Prove to me when you lost it. Now we're taking the 4-month foreclosure process and potentially making it a year, maybe longer, okay? And there are other problems. Truth in Lending Act violations. They did the wrong calculations. They didn't charge you the right way. Predatory lending, fraud. There's all kind of reasons, all kind of problems. They misallocated your funds. I see that all the time. You send it to the person who's collecting your money, they send it somewhere else, and then they even though you're current, they sue you for foreclosure. So there are many, many, many defenses to the foreclosure. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, okay, why? I was at a seminar a few months ago. A lady stood up and she says, I went to an attorney and I'd heard about this whole note thing, and I said, can you raise this as a defense? And the attorney said, that's just playing games. I'm not going to play games. I think that's malpractice. We're not playing games. We're giving you your legal rights. And more importantly, I'm trying to buy you time. That's what I'm doing. I'm not trying to give you a free house. I'm trying to buy you time. Time for your financial situation to improve. Maybe you lost your job a few months ago, but you know what? Now you're going to get your job. If I can buy you this much longer, you can start making payments again. We can get you on a modification. It's a win-win for everyone. The mortgage company has someone who's paying. They don't lose a bunch of money when the thing goes to sale. You keep your house. Sometimes it's my job to help them make good business decisions. Sometimes they don't make good business decisions, and I'm helping them. I like the win-win scenario. And if that means I got to stall them for a while, I'm going to do it. Okay? So you're not playing games. You're defending your legal rights. Modification. More time for modification. Generally, and Carol Ann's going to tell you this, it normally takes at least 3 to 4 months to do a modification, if not longer, depending on the bank. You know how long I told you it takes to do the foreclosure? 4 months. So there's a problem there, and they doing what I call the modification track and the litigation track at the same time. They're running like this. So even though you're working with them, a lot of times they're still moving forward with the litigation. And if the litigation side moves quicker than the modification side, you lose. That's a problem. Now sometimes they'll slow it down, sometimes they'll stop it, sometimes they'll cancel a sale because you're working with them, sometimes they won't. So I'm going to buy you more time to do the modification by doing the defenses, okay? And the final thing is leverage. If they think that I think that they've got a problem with their note and their mortgage, you know what? They may be willing to do something with us. I can't tell you how many modification proposals that I've seen come back from mortgage companies that, you know, at best they're cutting $5 a month off of their payment. When I know the guidelines are they should be knocking off $500 a month from their payments. All right? So maybe sometimes I need to say, you know what, guys, I don't think that you can ever sue them. I think maybe they get the house for free. Maybe we'll find out. What do you think about that? And they're like, you know, what do you want? How are we going to fix this? All right, good, let's talk about that, okay? So leverage is a good thing. Remember I told you the start of the dance, it gives you power that you haven't had for a while. Before the foreclosure's filed, they're here and you're here. After the foreclosure is filed, it starts to even up a little bit, okay? All right, next slide. Mediation, I talked about this before. Modification is something we do a lot of, but the mediation is similar. And again, this came from the judges saying, we're tired of people not being able to get a hold of the mortgage company. You know, you call them 50 times and you can't ever speak to someone, or you get someone in India or Pakistan and they're like, you know, we don't care. You know, pay your payments. You know, we cannot help you. You know, this is the attempt by the local judiciary to say, talk to these guys. You know, let's work this out, guys. And so they've started this mediation program in most of the counties in this area. And if you file an answer, there's a mandatory mediation process where you sit down with a representative of the mortgage company who has the power and the authority to resolve this problem with you, and a mediator, a third-party neutral mediator who said, come on, guys, let's work this together, okay? Next slide. The requirements, the mortgage company has to coordinate it, so they have to set it up with a mediator. They have to pay for it. I love that one. You don't have to pay anything. You get to participate in the mediation. There is a cost for it for the mediator, and the mortgage company has to pay it. And they have to be there. They can't just phone it in. They have to be there. It has to be a representative there, okay? You have to file an answer, right? We talked about it like 1,000 times. So if nothing else, you're going to remember that today. A responsive pleading, you have to provide financial documents so that they can evaluate whether you do qualify, and if you do, on what terms. And then you have to be there as well, okay? Mediation's a great thing. Again, if you're in that process, you have to file a responsive pleading. Next slide. All right, enough of foreclosure defense. Let's talk about bankruptcy. I know, it's a bad word. It's like, oh, bankruptcy. No, I'll never consider that. Nope. My parents would roll over in their graves if they ever heard I was filing bankruptcy. Well, you know what? It's a tool, right? And sometimes it's a wonderful tool. And in the right place. Now, I'm a bankruptcy attorney, but there are many times where someone's sitting across from me, I'm like, don't file. It doesn't make sense. It's all on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it's the best thing ever for you. Sometimes it's like, nah, that's not a good plan. Let's do something else, okay? But in the right use, it's a wonderful tool. Now, as far as the mortgage context, it's either a long-term solution or a temporary solution. Now, back in the day, back in before all this craziness, if someone came to me and they were behind on their payments on their mortgage, I put them in Chapter 13. It allows me to repay it over a long period of time. You know, they got to start making their payments, but then they can catch up the arrears. So if they want $20,000 in arrearage from you, or they're going to foreclose on you, we file a 13. You can take care of that. Nowadays, I kind of go towards modifications first, and then we'll talk about the bankruptcy second, and I'm going to tell you a bit about that. Chapter 7, sorry, going back. Chapter 7 is a temporary solution, and that's the difference as far as the mortgages go. The Chapter 7 is what most people file, most people think of when they think of a bankruptcy, primarily for unsecured type debt, collections, medical bills, credit cards, etc. It will stop a foreclosure sale, even on the day of foreclosure. All right, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I filed many, many bankruptcies at 10:55 in the morning. The 11 o'clock sale was occurring, and I were like, file. So it will stop it. As soon as we file it, either Chapter 13 or Chapter 7 will stop a foreclosure sale. So if you're in that point, again, the seminar is at 3 months ago. A person stood up and said, I'm going to lose my house next week. What can I do about it? The answer was, gosh, we're sorry. What? No. At least file the bankruptcy. At least call them. Do something. But the bankruptcy will stop this. If you find yourself in that position, the bankruptcy will stop it, and then we can figure out what we're doing. Okay? Next slide. Chapter 13, stops the foreclosure sale even on the day of sale. It allows repayment of the arrearage over 5 years. Let's flip to the next slide. Okay, the automatic stay, that's what stops it. It's an injunction that stops any kind of collection activity, including foreclosure sales, the moment it's filed. All right? 10:55, I file it. 11 o'clock, you have the sale, doesn't happen. Okay, so it will stop it immediately. Next slide. Flexible repayment, again, if you're $20,000 in arrearage and they only want $20,000 or nothing, we can pay that back over up to 5 years. And we can choose how to pay that back interest-free. Sometimes I do what's called a step-up plan, which is first year, I'm not going to pay any arrearage. And then as your financial situation improves, then I'll start upping the payments, okay, so that you can afford them. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. Next slide. Here's my favorite use of 13 now, and this may blow some of your minds, all right? It can allow you to strip off the second mortgage, all right? Our example again, let's go to the next slide. First mortgage balance, $200,000. Second mortgage, $50,000. Your house is worth $175,000. Now, let's say instead of doing a short sale or a deed in lieu, you say, I want to keep the house. I do. But, the payments are pretty high. I'm paying $500 a month maybe on the second mortgage, and it's going to be 10 years before I ever have equity again. So, I don't know about that. In a Chapter 13, if the mortgage balance on the first exceeds the value of the house, as it does here, the second mortgage is completely unsecured, and I can make it go away in a Chapter 13. We call it stripping it off. It's gone, okay? And so let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. And one more. This is my favorite strategy right now if there's a second mortgage. First thing someone comes in, we do a modification. Again, when I say we, you can do it too. It doesn't have to be an attorney, but we do a lot of it. It's just, we do the modification first. Why do I do that? Because instead of having to pay back $20,000 over 5 years and keep the same payment that you were having problems with anyway, if we do the modification, your payments are going to drop, probably, and the arrearage goes at the end of the loan, so you don't have to pay that back either. Okay? So I fix the first mortgage problem first, then we file the Chapter 13, and we strip off the second. So you have, your payments go from this to this, and your equity, well, the balance on your mortgage goes from this to this. Okay? So it makes more sense, it'll be sooner before you come back in. Very, very powerful technique. I haven't been able to use it for 10 years. And that was the last time that the balances on the houses had exceeded the value of the houses. So we're in a very unique period of time right now where you can take advantage of this technique. Let's go back 2 slides. One more. All right. It also addresses other debts, IRS problems, car loans. I can modify car loans in a Chapter 13, lower your interest rate, extend the duration, get your payments down, trying to help unsecured debt goes away as well. All right. Next slide. Go back. All right. One more. That's it. All right. Here's the big shock for most people who don't really know much about bankruptcy. It can actually improve your credit. People are like, oh no, bankruptcy is going to kill me for 7 years. I'm going to be in credit heck for 7 years. Well, it's probably not true. Because of the credit scoring models that we use now, bankruptcy almost always improves your credit and almost always dramatically within a year after filing. And that's because a good portion of your score is based on a ratio of your balances to your credit lines. Ideally, it should be under 30%. So if you have $10,000 in credit lines, you should be under 30%, so $3,000 in balances. As it gets more and more and more and closer to the $10,000, your scores start to plummet because of that, okay? Most of the clients that I see are more than 100%, 150%, because they've stopped making payments and they're backing up, and so that it's getting higher and higher. When we file the bankruptcy, it wipes out all of that junk, resets the ratios, gets rid of the late pays, so that even if you have the bankruptcy on your record that pulls the scores down, the overall net effect is it goes up. And that's the same regardless of the Chapter 13 or the Chapter 7. Many people who have settled their debts, their scores stayed down lower, much lower than if people just filed a bankruptcy, which is kind of surprising to many people. All right, Next slide. Next slide. It's the same thing, right? You know, you can wipe out the deficiencies. We talked about that before. It'll temporarily stop the foreclosure, wipes out most unsecured debt.